Good evening, everyone, and welcome to what I'm calling Season 2 of TriVersity Talk. I am one of your hosts, Stephen Bloomer-Teague.
And I am your other host, Wendy Stewart-Kaplan. Stephen, this is like making me feel like we're on RuPaul's Drag Race or something, right? We're Season 2, okay.
I know, and the guests are going to get even rowdier and crazier.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not calling it Season 2 because I wanted to take a prolonged Christmas vacation or anything. I mean, it's going to be completely different. But before we get started, thank you so much for tuning in. Whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, if you could give us like a like or a subscribe or a thumbs up or a heart or whatever you need to do to help us spread this video, we will be so grateful.
Fantastic. And Stephen, I noticed, even though Stephen and I are not together, well, we are virtually, but we're in different locations, we have done our utmost to coordinate our backgrounds. So I hope our audience appreciates all of our extra effort.
Indeed. It's great to be back at the center. When we were doing this over the holidays, I did it from home and I didn't have my nice little fluorescent lights that make my face look beautiful or my ring light. And now that I'm back at the center where I don't have to share this space with Wendy for the moment, I have so much leg room, which I did not have for a very long time.
Oh my goodness. Well, we should have just purchased a larger desk.
Indeed.
But I'm really excited about our guests that we have tonight, Stephen, especially kicking off the new year, because I don't know, the new year to me is all about newness and freshness. And we have a whole new administration coming in, and our guests tonight, they are just, I love what they're doing. They're totally cool. Tonight we have Randi Barlow and Bob Barlow. She is a social worker whose work focuses on serving those facing gender issues. Bob Barlow, her partner, is a retired teacher and author. And the coolest thing about them, they host a support group called Tfast. And we want to tell you all about it.
And on that note, welcome, Bob and Randi.
Thanks for having us. Hello, hello.
Thank you all so much for being here. So, I'm sure people watching, they have a million questions. So we'll take it from the top. Tell us what Tfast does as a support group and how it came about initially.
Well, I can talk about the present and the past, but we'll break it up. Right now, Tfast is a virtually meeting monthly support group for families and allies of transgender or gender nonconforming, gender non-binary folks. And it ends up pulling in people from a pretty wide range of areas. And it never ceases to amaze me how many people show up and how many issues get dealt with, and in some cases really like amazingly beautifully either resolved or resources come to people. It really is a lovely thing.
So I'd be curious, first of all, what was your inspiration behind it? How long you have had it for, and some of the issues, if you can discuss the kinds of issues you deal with.
Sure.
So I'll talk about the inspiration. We are the parents, lucky enough to be the parents of a beautiful son who came out as transgender in 2013 and did a full gender transition at that time. But leading up, in the years leading up to his formal coming out, there was strong signs that he was identifying as male, even though he was female assigned at birth. And at that time in Orange County, where we live, there was no resources whatsoever. And I felt so scared, anxious, I just didn't know, I didn't know any other trans people at that time. And I found a beautiful support group in the city, at Tfast in the city. And it was like a lifesaver for me. And then Bob joined in. I went at first. So fast forward all these years later, and having gone through the journey that parents do when they are trying to affirm there and make peace with having a trans child. And we wanted to give back here in Orange County.
Great.
So in 2015, a couple of years after our son transitioned, after we had processed everything and came to find such joy and beauty in that experience, so that's when we started Tfast.
And it was interesting that itself was a process, because we started talking about giving back. We started talking about creating a group years before we actually did it, and so we really had to sort of get to the space where we were ready to do that. So it was definitely a process.
So within that process, what was involved in, I mean, that's really something. It's like going on an exploration and putting down a flag, right? And saying, okay, this is territory I am now going to explore. Because it is, in many ways, certainly for parents, Brave New World. So how did you, I know you've grown so much. How did you go about getting initial parents? How did they find you? Did you work through the schools? What was your path?
Well, since Bob and I are living in the community we both grew up in. So we know a lot of people, and Bob was a teacher for many, many years here in the local school district, and I've been a therapist for many years. So we already had many connections to, the medical network, school, staff at schools, and just our personal connections. So I know early on, the local paper did an article about our group, which that's actually the way people find us now. If they Google,
we're not very, very high tech at this point. And that's the interesting thing is we're not all that easy to find, and yet it really, especially at the beginning, there was a tremendous amount of pent up demand.
Yeah.
And people just found us because they needed to. And so it has been, and it's been a pretty steady. There have been times when we were holding actual live meetings in our living room. There were times when our living room was jammed with 30 some people. And that wasn't that rare.
Yeah. Did you have any expectation of that? Because you start a group for, transgender family and friends in a rural area. I mean, so you knew that this was something you went through in a rural area. Did you think that you were going to get 30 people in your room?
I honestly was kind of shocked, because like Bob said, it was within a few months of starting the group where we had that size. Now these days, it's moderated to more, maybe usually 10 to 20 people, but which is still an incredible turnout for this area. Yeah. I do want to say, and this is, I'm saying this with humility, but I found that people also came from outside of the area to the group. They would drive a distance because we were unaffiliated. There wasn't really an organization. There might be now, but there wasn't any P flags up here. And people liked the fact that it was kind of this very private, we were in our home. We weren't in a community center or in a church or in a synagogue meeting.
And that's the upside of not being as visible.
Right. It's very private here. We live in a quiet area, and people liked that it was it became like a very warm,
nurturing.
Right.
In a world post-COVID, that gives me an excellent idea in terms of maybe getting our support group membership up would be to have it in someone's home.
Yeah, that's great. To be welcoming people into your home that you didn't know, even that really takes a lot of trust, respect, and my God, what you guys have done is really, really incredible. I'm really impressed by it. As parents, and Randi, you and I discussed this a little. You met a mom and her son came by, and as you said, he was totally together and cool, and this is when you were going through the process with your son, and it made you feel could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think parents that's a tough parent.
So just reflecting back to where I was at when I first was, in that kind of, anxiety-ridden state, pre-transition with my son. when and so, like I said, I didn't know any other trans people. I just did not, especially I didn't know any trans men. And when I went to the support group in the city, which is called Trans Families, it's associated with New York City PFLAG. And I have to give a big shout out to Judy Sellish, who is the most beautiful moderator of this group. And early on, I might have been my second or third meeting there, her son Eli came and joined the group. And when I met him, and here was a beautiful, young man post-transition. He was in a doctoral program. He was a warm, deep-hearted person. And I looked across that big room, in New York City, and it was a big group. And I saw him, and I could see my child in his face. And I remember seeing like this, I just had this like wash of relief. It was like this very like physical experience where I just said, this is going to be okay. I can kind of see where our trajectory is going, and it really felt so much better.
Wow, that's really amazing, and thank you for giving a shout out to PFLAG. They are incredible, and they were such inspiration behind what you did.
Definitely.
And I think you're bringing up a good point that parents and people going through this with their children, you really have to all bind together, and the kid gloves have to come off. Yeah. And everyone's got to be right. And that's not so easy, because we all as human beings have our shells and walls that we hide behind. But you really have to get real with this. Now, I'm curious in terms of the growth of the amount of parents in your group and kids in your group. Have you noticed exponential growing in the last couple of years?
One thing I've noticed, not the numbers go up and down in waves.
Okay.
But what's interesting is that a sort of a kind of depth has developed in our group. In that, and this might be a little inside baseball, but it's good to consider for anyone who's thinking about a support group like this. People who have been there for a while play different roles. There are people in the same way that Randi seeing Eli and saying, there's the future for Julian. The people are able to look at other parents, especially if you imagine a parent who just 3 days ago found out and had no idea, and they're sitting there weeping. They're in the presence of people who can provide possible resources, endocrinologist referrals, information, but also other people who are kind of models of, okay, here's what a year from now is going to look like. You won't be crying as much. You'll be asking some practical questions and, talking about what maybe surgeries or whatever. And then there's always, I remember at the first meeting that I was at, there were people at various levels of emotional states. And then there was this one couple, they were almost glowing. And I was in the city, right? In the city that we went. Yeah. And I was wondering, what is their story? And I got great comfort from their presence. And they were people who, 5 years earlier had been exactly where I was at, wondering what was going to happen. What will my child's future be like? Will he be safe? Who will love him? All those questions. The answer was sort of sitting there in the beatific smiles on those parents' faces.
And that's like the common theme that crosses. I find in our support group with parents who come, no matter what their ethnic, religious, economic, background is, the big questions when they're first dealing with this is, will my child be safe in this world? And will they be loved?
Will they be loved? I mean, that's all you care about, right? As a parent. Now, have you ever had within the group parents that were resistant?
Oh, yeah.
You have? Oh, I'm surprised. And that's a learning lesson for me, because I'm assuming once they came to your group, everybody would just be so happy to have found a group like yours.
Sometimes I don't really think of them as resistant. I really think of them as probably scared.
Yeah, of course.
And yeah.
And sometimes that, just to interrupt, sometimes that happens in the context of a couple.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. Like somebody is really all on board and they drag their partner to the group and their partner's not ready.
Yeah.
You're sitting there sort of
like this. And if it comes, and
Right.
they want facts and figures and science and research, and
right, and they'll refute. Right, they're sitting, and
Yeah.
but I get it though. It's a scary. It's that, and people
Scary, right.
looking for refuge somewhere in statistics or something before they realize they have to. Okay, let's face this. Let's roll up our sleeves and
Right.
get it.
And we've gotten because we have a core group of families who've been with us for a long time, and they don't come to every meeting anymore. Our mailing list has grown, just consistently. But like if I know there's a family coming that's struggling with this issue of affirming their child because of, say, religious reasons,
Yeah,
I can call on some families, and just say, hey, can you come join the group? Families that might be from who struggled with that issue, or have that common background.
That's what I mean about the depth. There seems to be. It's almost like we've got this kind of squad, to the extent that sometimes, I don't want to give away any secrets, but sometimes we'll think, oh, we've got a whole bunch of new people coming. We have to make sure that this particular member shows up. Almost as there'll be someone who's like the gregarious greeter kind of, and we can't.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, it helps, I think, by being aware that you're helping everybody connect. Now,
Yes.
with parents that have come to you, what's the youngest child of any of the people?
Well, the child's gotten older, but the youngest child. Oh, well, we've had actually 2 families who've come to us with children who were showing strong signs of gender nonconformity, and their children were about 3 years old.
Wow.
Because that's about the time when somebody, thinking about, gender being on a spectrum and not one or the other. There's some children from a very young age that very strongly have an identity with their with the gender that they were not assigned at birth. And
I know so many people that I can honestly say that about. And I think now these times are more understanding and more welcoming than like when I was growing up. I think parents did not know how to deal with that at all. I think this is definitely a different time. But I'm curious, like, with kids going to school and stuff, or do you think the educational system is aware of this more than they used to be, and that they're willing to support and help?
That's such a great question. I'll take part of it anyway. One thing that is surprising, or maybe not surprising, that surprised me was the inconsistency from district to district. There are some that are really, right on top of this and are very assertively and proactively learning all they can and exposing their staffs to, opportunities to professionally develop around it. And then there are some that are far behind. And the other thing I'll say is that the stunning changes over since Julian, for instance, was in the high school, and now.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to generalize. I think if I were to, I'd say the schools have come a long way.
Yeah,
and we find that so many of our schools, over the last 5 years, from what we've heard from parents, really have come to understand, what the right thing is, what they are legally obligated to do.
Right.
Some schools are very proactive. They bring in, speakers who will train their staff or do programs for students and parents on, on things like, children's rights to use the bathroom that reflects their gender identity, and other things that other parents could balk at if they didn't understand. But I mean, I remember one of the biggest challenges for me as a parent stepping out of my support group role is when, my son Julian, even though again did not come out till early 20s, during high school, always dressed very masculinely, and felt very uncomfortable in using in the locker room and bathrooms. And I, being the person I am, I'm always ready to pick up the fight. I've always been. I was at those protests, and stuff. But my son did not want to have a lot of attention drawn to him, and there were some issues, relating to. I won't even, not even going into detail. with, teachers that were resistant to helping him develop a comfortable plan. And I was ready to go up the line with that, but my son did not want me to do that. And so that's a big part of our, the challenge of when you're the parent of, a child, like this, right, is respecting where they're at.
Yeah, it's not
sometimes,
your transition.
Sometimes if you want, and we've had parents, and this is very interesting, parents whose children have come out as transgender, and the parents really embrace it, and almost they become part of their identity becomes being the parents of a trans kid.
Right.
But then at some point, that trans child wants to, when they maybe are moving on to college or something, want to go stealth, do not want to advertise that they're trans. And that parent is being asked then to pull back and not talk so much about it. So that's that, when Bob was saying in our group, we've dealt with so many different levels of issues. I mean, it's so incredible. You can't even think about.
And then, right. And then when you factor in, the kids' lives that sometimes they do intersect, and, kids might be attending the same school or something like that. So there are if somebody wanted to do a really good reality show, which I'm not suggesting that we do, we could definitely do one around Tfast. But of course, we're completely confidential. So, sorry.
All faces blurred. All faces
right.
blurred. You can do it.
Across everyone's face, Stephen.
So, Bob and Randi, I want to ask, because in one of the articles I read about Tfast, you talk about dealing with the sense of loss that might come from the process, the transition process. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, maybe in what you went through in processing Julian's transition and some of your clients or support group members.
Yeah. I mean, it is, I think when something, about your life, whatever it is, throws you a curveball and things take a turn in a direction that you didn't anticipate, and one that might be sort of fraught with what you perceive to be challenges, there is a sense of loss. And on a personal level, even though I've always been a parent that, I've tried to be that parent that's like, you be you to my children, and as a matter of fact, luckily we were that way with Julian. We let him, even though we didn't know he was trans, he always wore boys' clothes, we let him express himself. However, I do have to admit that I did have this image of my child who started life with this wild, long hair, and just, I saw them, getting married, and what they might be, wearing and what their lives might look like. And, we project, even though we try not to, some of us try not to pressure our children, there is a vicarious kind of thing that you kind of, you want to see, your child go down a path that maybe was happy for you, that reflects what you did with your life. So when it became clear that, that was not going to be Julian's journey, it was, I spent a lot of time crying, and part of it was definitely, and I came to realize, and there wasn't that much out there, and, honestly, in the, what is it now, 8 years since Julian transitioned, there's a lot more out there. But, and if I had known this, just this very simple thing when I was dealing with this, I think it might have helped. I was so scared of losing my child. I didn't know, I was like, who are you? Are you going to be someone else? Mm-hmm. But then I came to realize it was not about losing a child. It was just about losing my perception of their gender. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that when he went on testosterone, he wasn't going to have a major personality change. He wasn't going to turn into someone else. So I was really scared, so that was a part of my loss. And then there were smaller losses along the way, the loss, of some of the medical things that my son chose to do as a part of his transition. And everyone's transition is different, of course. But he did go through a surgery, and, there was a loss of, a part of his body that, I took care of when, when he was young, and,
yes.
And I associated it, in a different way. When you lost that part of your body, it was usually due to a disease. And so, I remember there was just a lot of on and off, feel that sense of loss. But But I don't feel that way anymore. I'm fully grieved.
and there are so many lovely, when the outcome is so nice, and when you see the smile of someone who is now inhabiting the skin they were, that's right for them. But that sense of loss also, and you sort of referred to it a little bit, but that the role that you play as a big part of your role as a parent is making sure that no harm comes to your child.
Totally right.
and then it takes a lot of, you have to get good at cognitive dissonance, I guess, to start to say, okay, for my child to be happy, he's going to have to do something that, some sharp object is going to have to come near him. And that's definitely that's a hard one.
Well, as a parent, that, we want to protect our kids from sharp objects. We don't want our kids running with scissors.
Right.
But, Randi, you've used the term so many times tonight, the journey. And you talked about life throwing you these curveballs. And that really nails it. Well, anyone's life is a journey, and all of our lives get filled with curveballs. And when you have a child that early on is going to be a child that will transition, okay, if you have the signs, you had certain expectations. And then those expectations, of course, change. But on the positive side, they are now filled with new expectations. When you see a successful young man who's been through this and is just doing well in life, you have a whole different set of expectations now for your son. You would have to. And isn't that great and fulfilling for the two of you and for any parent?
Absolutely. The other thing is that, of course, the big transition was Julian's transition, but Randi and I also experienced our own transition. We became, we were still parents, but we became parents of somebody the same but different. But we had our own journey to deal with, all the levels of acceptance, and then the questions that from folks in the in the area, different various responses that people had,
right.
Concerns about how things would go at work, and
all those issues come up in our group, all the different how will how will the grandparents deal with it? How will my coworkers, and
yeah, I was going to ask that, because that's like the the real life stuff, right? How do you deal with that? Is there a protocol, or you just yeah?
Fearlessly.
Deal with? Are you asking, Wendy, in terms of how do you deal with letting people know and
we talk about this a lot. We've talked about it with our adult members that transitioned. The crazy questions that people ask. Stephen and I, it's unbelievable, that have no boundaries, completely insensitive. So how did the two of you deal with that with your friends? And
yeah, well, I do have to say, and that I'm grateful. For us, it was not so hard, because we have we've had the beautiful privilege of having very accepting liberal. We live in a liberal world in our own little bubble, and so we didn't have to worry about telling our family members or and as a matter of fact, just as an aside, my mother, when my family flew down to Florida to tell her, Bob did, Julian, and my other child, Allie. I couldn't go, but they flew down to tell her in person that Julian had come out as transgender, because he was about to start everything, testosterone, going for surgery, legal. And when they told her, my daughter Allie filmed my mother, and my mother said, I knew it. And then went on to become quite an advocate. She lives in Palm Beach County. She's very involved with her PFLAG. She's been asked to speak at at these communities about being the Jewish grandma of the trans grandson. She speaks along with the gay rabbi. They're the two speakers. And she's in her late 80s. But going back to
her late 80s, wow,
she's amazing. But going back to your question, at first, we had a lot of people to tell because gender is something that's public. It's not like sexual orientation where if you want to keep it private, that's up to you. Your gender is how you're perceived. So we went methodically, through emails. Bob wrote a letter. He wanted to tell all the staff at his school.
I work in a large school, and I wanted everyone to know.
Yeah, and Julian had gone there. You'd run into people at the store and they would say to us, our other child identifies as female. So they'd say to us, how are the girls? And at first it was a little daunting. Because you don't want to just say, oh, by the way, and then say, bye, I got to go. There was a lot of times when I avoid people at the store,
Or how much time do you have?
Yeah. But we found, honestly, by being honest, and pure about what we went through, and we're open people. So we don't mind, we're okay with personal questions. And our son is very, very generous and told us that we could, share what we felt we needed to share. So, we've got a really incredible response. If anything, it brought us closer to people. It was very, it really, and I just want to say one thing. But now, so the funny thing is, now fast forward, all these years, and everyone knows pretty much. But there is occasionally somebody we haven't seen in years who are, maybe isn't on social media with us, and they don't know. And we're like, yay, we love telling our story. Now it's like, is there somebody that doesn't know? Yeah.
It used to be scary, and now
but it was but other families, not everyone has that experience. I mean, I just, I do want to say that it's been, it's hard.
You're very blessed that your family was so supportive. You really are. We have members of our community that have not experienced that.
On that front, I'm going to go ahead. Simone posted a question, and I'm going to post it up and then paraphrase it a little bit. But basically what Simone asked is, do you find families whose children have transitioned, are those families, or do the extended families sometimes turn their backs on, I would say, A, the children, and then B, the more immediate family? Simone says in the older transitioning transgender person, that is a fairly high rate.
Yeah. And so I guess what Simone is asking relates more to younger.
Yes.
People. I mean, we've had some families of older people come to the group, who've transitioned later in life, but for the most part, it's elementary, it's elementary, middle, high school, and young adults is now this is anecdotal. This is based on through my work and through our support group. But I would say the vast majority, if they're not affirming at first, once their child has, made their transition, or, once their young adult has made their transition, they usually do come around because first of all, they love them. And then they can kind of understand it, but, once they see what's going on, the fear lessens. So that way the, being able to affirm moves in. We don't, I don't know if there's anybody that's continued to be very rejecting who's had an extended family member, but I'm sure.
I'll also just jump in and say that there's a statistic that, every group has its little pet statistics, and I actually can't even recite the actual one, but the role that acceptance and affirming takes in ensuring the safety of a child, it's huge. There's a gigantic statistical evidence there.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but the attempted suicide rate drops.
Exactly.
So acceptance, affirmation, and people, and if you sit in our living room or on our Zoom meetings, more than, if you're there 2 or 3 times, you've heard that quoted 2 or 3 times already. So I do think that people
I will say that, we've had a number of members whose marriages have broken up, but, the sense there was that even though it might have happened, maybe dealing with the gender issues with their children was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. There were other underlying issues.
There had to be, right. I was going to say underlying things, and
Yeah.
this was the thing that pushed it over the edge.
But, on the surface, one parent, has shared that they don't feel that the other parent was as, affirming as that they might want. And in my private practice, since I am getting often families in crisis over this, at first, there are family members that are not affirming and very rejecting, as a matter of fact, and can be harsh about it. But going down the line, I would say, I don't know statistically, but my personal experience is that people come around. People come around. I guess for children, it's, for children.
For children, it's even, I think, and Stephen will agree with me on this. For adults, it's just really so hard a lot of the times. And it seems like the later, when you transition in your 50s, when everyone, you use that word expectations, when everyone had certain expectations because they knew you X amount of years, and everyone at your job knew you were one way, and then boom, you hit them with a whole other spin. There will be people that will come along, okay, that will support you, but then there'll be a whole lot of family members that will never get it.
Right.
And it's very isolating for the person and their partner that this is happening to.
I know. And I had an experience many years ago in my private practice of an older, closeted trans feminine person who interestingly enough, their partner was accepting, but told no one else. They were very nervous. They had they operated in very conservative circles.
Oh yeah.
Extended family, their job, it was a middle Orange County, more rural kind of, and very conservative. And they never felt, that they could really just be open. They just kind of express themselves in private.
I'll inject a hopeful note here.
Yes.
The older people who are transitioning are surrounded by other people of their, by a similar demographic, let's say. I have seen so many hopeful signs in the attitudes of younger people.
It is great.
Toward the whole breadth of the LGBTQ arena. And I'm just, it's sort of like, I'm just waiting for, for the next generation to take over.
Catch up.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's just, I really do think that there's a brighter future, and that people, so if we were to sort of fast forward into the future and imagine somebody who's now 20, who is then 50, let's say, I think we can hope that people would be more accepting at that point, which is not to take anything away from the, how messed up it is that it's a burden for older people who transition.
And some schools are starting to integrate gender identity curriculum, which is beautiful.
Great.
And, my son, who's a first grade teacher, he's very committed, to, kind of being visible. Within age appropriate ways. He doesn't go and, he doesn't tell his students he's transgender, but he does lessons on gender. He'll put he puts a kind of a line up at the front of his classroom, and will say children, explain that one side is when you feel really super boyish, and the other side is you feel super girlish, but sometimes you feel in between, and go. So have so stand. Where do you, where are you feeling today? Just to let them know that it's okay,
to have had that, I primarily identify as a gay cisgender male, but gender obviously played a big component in my life. It also played a component in how people perceived me as gay even before I came out. Right. And to have a teacher that could have made you feel like, oh, you don't have to be this end or that end, that you can be anywhere. What a powerful influence on a young person.
And to read just a children's book, integrate into the curriculum a book, that talks about, the prince, I think it was The Princess Boy, and there's ones for both, for either gender, that represents when your interests or your expression crosses those gender boundaries. My son will often say, when he's doing a presentation about his own journey, that one of the sadnesses and difficulties when he was little is he did not see himself reflected in anyone else. He did not, and he couldn't verbalize what it was, who he was. And, and there was in the media at that time, there really weren't any visible, representations of how he felt. So he feels that that's what he wants to do, as a teacher now, is to be that, to represent to children. And now his school, he is in Brooklyn, I have to say, but his school calls him down, like the principal will call him down if a child is coming through the building that's presenting with, questioning gender issues. And Julian has become kind of like, the consultant on that issue. And they had him do, trainings for the staff and things like that. So, and I was a school social worker a number of years ago, and maybe about 15 years ago, we had a gender nonconforming child, and the principal turned to me and said, what do you think? And I said, get rid of those, because the child was being resistant about standing on the girls' line. I said, get rid of those. Why do you need those gendered lines? That's just simple kind of thing. But the principal looked at me like I had two heads. Like how it's so important in the institution. That's how you divide the class up. But now I think we've evolved since then.
Well, we've definitely evolved where, we've definitely broken down barriers. There's a lot more work to do, but within that, there's just more and more children that are realizing that they want to transition, and you guys have got an incredible, I hope you're okay with you guys. I call everybody you guys. Or I
do get called out on that from my very.
I got called out on that.
They said, "Don't too masculine," but I always say you guys.
I do too. Bronx, everybody was you guys, or yous. So, but certainly the kind of support that you're giving to both parents and the children. Now, along those lines, I wanted to talk a little bit about the puberty inhibitors, using hormones in that way. Do you, from your experience, are more and more parents doing that? Jazz Jennings, certainly we've all heard about, had an effect on it. What are you finding in the landscape of dealing with that?
Yeah, I've found that when a child is presenting pre-puberty, very strongly, identifying as the gender not assigned at birth, that it's really, oh my God, what an incredible thing to offer that child. And, puberty blockers are just, there's no permanent, there's nothing permanent about it. It's like pressing a pause button on their biological puberty. So it just depresses that. And what's beautiful is that they don't have to go through that incredible, horror when they see their body starting to change in a direction they don't identify with.
Direction, yeah.
And interestingly, and I'm not a doctor, so I really don't want to, I certainly, but from what I understand, that from a hormonal perspective, kids are all the same until puberty. So inside, they don't feel, a boy doesn't feel necessarily different from a girl. As a society, we have, put on expectations on what they're interested in and things like that. But once you hit puberty, it's not just the physical development, it's the emotional development that happens too. And it's kids, when children do, when children are expressing that, and they can be given the gift of a puberty blocker to buy them some more years until they make a definite, until they and their families make a definite decision. It's such a gift. And, what's great about that is that their mental health status is the same. The statistics, they're the same as anyone else, as opposed to kids who, really are horrified by their puberty. That's when we start to see a lot of anxiety and depression.
Right. And which could lead to suicide. Randy, you just brought up like the best point in the world. And I'm so glad that you said that here. Many people don't really understand puberty blockers, and it is still controversial, but it's controversial. You just brought up the best reason in the world. I'm thinking when my daughter went through puberty, she became this absolute, I didn't even think she was related to us anymore. So, but imagine, right? The hormones are raging, and then you're not comfortable in your body because you're in the wrong body. Right. And you look in the mirror and that's reaffirmed. And you go to school and you have to deal with the hormones and the bullying and everything else. You've just brought up a really great point that the puberty blockers they put the kid's body on pause.
And they give parents a little bit of time to
Right.
get,
Yeah.
And you're not trying to undo nature, I mean, you guys know from having, knowing people who have lived lives for decades, in the gender they don't identify with,
right?
How difficult that is when they are trying to transition to kind of,
absolutely,
and it just saves the kids from so many interventions, which is, and that, I feel sad. If my son had just been born a few years later, puberty blockers were not available, at.
But your son had YouTube for Parents. What could
so on the subject of your son, we have a message here or a little comment here from Julian Barlow. My loving, brilliant parents.
Don't make me start crying in the middle.
I know. I feel like
Thanks, Julian.
we love you.
And while we're on the subject of comments, Laura Cormier asked a question. Do you see a difference in female to male or male to female in children transitioning regarding acceptance?
That's a really, I will definitely say that I see a difference in terms of willingness to transition at certain points in development, because I do think in our culture, it's so much harder for someone assigned male at birth to begin to start to express themselves as a female, if they're, in middle school and high school, that is a harder one. We don't have as much of a place in our culture for that. For someone like my son who was assigned female at birth, you can wear boys' clothes, you can have a short haircut, and people will just write you off as a tomboy. It's just
right.
So I definitely see that and families are often more scared with people who are with kids who are identifying as trans feminine. But as far as acceptance goes, I think it's a mixed bag, because I've had both through the support group and my private practice, children who have transitioned, both female to male, male to female, and have been very, very accepted and affirmed by their peers at pivotal times, during like middle school or high school. We have one of our regular support group members has a child who, right in the middle of middle school, did a social transition from male to female, and we were all in awe of that child, because we felt that took a lot of courage. And when I'll say that to other kids who I know who are transitioning, how brave they are, often I will get the response, no, it's something I just have to do. I mean, this is just who I am. They don't feel it's even a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Even though parents sometimes think their kids are choosing it, they don't feel it's a choice.
Right.
Yeah.
Very important message that you just got out there. So with all of your experience and knowledge, you're going to hate me for this, but when are you guys writing a book?
That's his department. I said he can interview me. He's a writer.
Bob, I know you're an author, and you know what you've shared here with us tonight. So many people put out books with quote unquote, case studies, what their life experiences have been. And certainly the two of you with the experiences that you've had you could do an amazing book that would be so helpful to people.
We'll get on it.
I know I don't mean to put Bob or my son Julian on the spot, but I know they've talked about doing a father-son book, because they've done some presentations together, and I think would be powerful, because I think, like you said, I think there are at this point there are many books now. Parents have talked about their journey, but I don't think there is many with a parent and their trans child, working on a book together.
Right.
And maybe talking about different points of the journey from two different perspectives, which I think would be very interesting.
Absolutely.
I just wonder, by the way, do you know that Jazz, who, as my kids have said, is one of the one of the superstars, the rock stars of the, the trans world?
Yes, she is.
Jazz's family is originally from Middletown, New York.
Oh my gosh.
I think her grandfather, her mom, I think grew up in Middletown, if I'm not mistaken, or her grandpa's a doctor, years ago there. So I thought that was just interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
It's a cool piece of trivia. I had no idea.
Now, but yeah.
So, Bob and Randy, if somebody wanted to learn more about Tfast or interested in potentially being part of the group, where could we send them in terms of like an email or a website?
Yeah, an email is the best way. I'm grinning because again, we're so it's almost like we're operating with rotary phones here. Message in the hollowed out oak tree. And
Nothing for nothing. In our kitchen at my house, we have a Mickey Mouse rotary dial phone, which is our primary phone. So I love me some rotary dial.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great time. So I would say that the email address for Tfast.
When you kind of Google us and you find that old article from the I think it was from the Photo News.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I found.
It has our landline phone number, which we and our email and we Tfast has an email. So
Tfast Group at email?
Yes, yeah. So it's Tfast Group at gmail.com.
gmail.com. So just for everybody who's watching, I have just shared a link, and this is in the comments for both Facebook and YouTube. This is the article we're talking about from the Photo News. And then I will hide that comment and add a new one, which is I will post the group, tfastgroup at gmail.com.
Oh, great. Perfect.
The again, we're I joke, but we're maintaining a low profile just because the main work is the work. But if people want to get in touch with us that way, that's really good. And the interesting thing is that the email account has become a sort of a clearinghouse. When people do have questions, they can ask a question. We're able to share that question with the entire group. And then so it's kind of an adjunct to the monthly support group meetings. And it has also, and one thing that we didn't mention about the meetings, one very lovely thing, is the some of the subgroups that have grown out of it. Say a couple of parents with especially young kids will form a play group. We've also had
wow.
Yeah, one of our regular members, she organized a play group for young gender nonconforming kids, which I don't know about during COVID, but it was meeting regularly, which is beautiful.
And some musical matchups have taken place too. So again, even though we're still pretty low tech, it actually does provide an opportunity for people to
absolutely.
Yeah. And since we don't provide ongoing support for the trans individuals or trans kids themselves, somebody not broke off from a group, but spun out from our group, a lovely member, and she's developed a great presence for that is serving LGBTQ individuals in general, which I'm so happy that that's happening, because we can't take it all on ourselves, and we have had the beautiful pleasure once a year of hosting like a big family get together where everybody and kids have met each other, and formed friendships, which has been very heartwarming for us, because sometimes kids feel kind of isolated, and parents, of course, of younger children are not comfortable with their kids trying to meet other trans kids online, until they get a little older. And it's so great that they've been able to make those connections. We're hoping next summer that we'll be safe enough to do that again.
Yes.
Well, and we will all stay in touch. We do an amazing prom every year.
Oh yeah.
For LGBTQ kids, their families, allies, everybody's welcome at our prom. It has just been so incredible. This year, of course, we couldn't even do something like that virtually. Right. I don't know what next year will bring, probably not, but once we can all be together again, we'll all stay in touch, because the kids can't believe it. The parents can't believe it. It's really, how magical a night is it, Stephen? It's magical.
It's magical. I mean, just seeing everybody together. And I wonder if this is becoming less and less true for kids growing up. But I mean, I didn't get to go to the prom with with a boy. So, to have that opportunity both as a young one and as an adult, it's a great event.
It just brings back quickly a memory when Julian was going for his high school photos, for a high school yearbook. And again, hadn't come out as trans yet, but did not want to wear that girl drape thing, no way. And we go to register, and I see two photographers are registering, the people coming. One guy, I'm basing this on outward appearance, which I know is very uncool. One guy looked kind of conservative. The other guy looks like an old hippie, long, ponytail. What's wrong with that guy? And I said, my child does not want to wear the drape. Can they wear the, he's like, nobody ever asked me that, but that's cool with me. And then, our high school let him put it in. And, these are the kinds of things that we dealt with not that long ago,
Yes.
but
that was a big deal. And something
that was
we
a
had
big
to be
deal,
nervous
right?
about.
Yeah.
But I think all of those little acts end up adding up. And so I think that was it was a courageous thing to do.
Absolutely.
Well, Bob and Randy, Wendy, do you have any more questions before I?
I'm in awe of the two of you and what you do. And I'm sitting here thinking, because Wendy thinks big, I'm thinking my two parents from other places now could come on. And it's not the same as being in person, but what is the world that we have right now.
Right.
And the amount of support that you all can give is really quite incredible. There's such a need for what you do out there. So thank you for doing it.
And I just wanted to say one statement that I often say, and I want to address this to any parents who are at an earlier stage in the process that might be watching or listening, that really what started out for me as one of the scariest things that I dealt with, it turned into one of the most meaningful and beautiful parts of my life, and seeing my child just go from one place to a place of happiness, contentment.
Oh, yeah.
It's really been enhanced my life, so I just want people to know that it can take, lots of parents feel that way, who go down this road. So
that is such positive support to leave everybody with. Thank you.
Yes.
Also, thank you to both of you for all the incredible work that you
Absolutely.
do, and for creating space and this very comfortable space. And it was such a pleasure just being able to let our hair down. Well, and be able to chat.
And you'll have to come to our center. Love our center.
Fantastic. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us at our new time, and this will be our new time going forward. So tune in next Thursday, and thank you again, and we will see you next week. Good night, everyone.
Oh, and Bob and Randy, hang out. We want to take a group picture.
Okay,
great.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.